Oh, hitting stuff everywhere. Today's video is sponsored by Native Sons Goods, makers of the highest quality woven guitar, bag, and camera straps you'll ever see. Native Sons straps are handmade one at a time in the USA with unparalleled love and care. Click the link in the description to check out their new expanded lineup featuring all new 3-inch guitar straps. And remember, when you support my sponsor, you support this channel, and I sure appreciate it.
Hey y'all, it's Shitpost Friday.
No more trips with this Buchla. It's been cleaned of all LSD.
Hey, how's it going? Good dudes and good dudettes. Brad the Guitologist here, and it is time again for Shitpost Friday. We have an overflowing cup of news this week to get to. I did not do a Shitpost Friday last week, and as you guys well know, anytime I do that, I have to kind of make up for it. So this week I want to start, as I always do, with the sad news. The sad news this week, Vincent Bell passed away. He was in his 80s. I think he was 87 years old. But he was the inventor of the choral line of guitars back in the 1960s. He invented the electric sitar, put under the choral name that was actually made by Dan Electro. He was also a musician who played with all kinds of different people. If you guys want to check out Vincent Bell and you want to learn more about who he was, what kind of music he played and all that kind of stuff, I highly encourage you to do that. He is kind of one of the forgotten guitar heroes of the 1960s, and he was an inventor to boot.
Recording star Vincent Bell warms up an instrument which is creating excitement in today's popular music world. It's an electric sitar, invented and designed by Mr. Bell. It produces the new exotic Eastern sound first introduced by the Beatles.
Stand by for a take.
There is a friend of mine, Doug Tulloch, who was the author of his historical book on Dan Electro. He had known Vincent for a long time and had him write the foreword to that book. He had an estate sale not too long ago that looked like it was just an amazing estate sale. He lived over, I think, in New Jersey, which is where Dan Electro guitars were made. His house was just an historical treasure trove. I was real sad at the time because I wasn't going to be able to make it over there to this estate sale, but I think Doug was able to procure a few things directly from him, like his own personal choral prototypes and things like that. And you know, like I said, just real sad that he had to pass away, but he did live a good long life. Like I said, I think he was about 87 years old. So rest in peace, Vincent Bell, and I encourage everybody watching this to go check out Vincent Bell. The main event here on this Shitpost Friday that I wanted to get to was the issue of fake news and how it pretty much has started to permeate every facet of 21st century life, including guitarists and guitar news shows like this one. This was sent to me via email. A gentleman said he had seen this on YouTube and he was kind of shocked to hear it. The guitarist Jess Greenberg, who I'm sure you guys know, she has a lot of talent, let's put it this way. She doesn't have to, you know, gussy herself up and slather on all the makeup and push up her breasts and everything to be noticed. I don't think she would have to do that. I think she's good enough on her own merits. She has, you know, done some, she's not a virtuoso by any means, but what she does is very good, and it's very solid cover songs of a lot of, you know, classic rock tunes. But she has managed to amass an enormous following on YouTube over the years by doing what she does, and obviously she's a very pretty lady, so that's, you know, obviously going to help. I've covered her on this channel before, so I haven't covered her, but we've talked about her on this channel before, so I'm sure you guys are aware of Jess Greenberg. But anyway, he sent me this email and said, hey, it looks like she might have died. It looks like she was on some kind of cruise and she fell overboard and they can't find her body and all this stuff. And, you know, sure enough, I go and check out YouTube and I find the YouTube video, and it sounded familiar actually when he was talking about it, but it sure sounded familiar when I saw the video. Watch this and you'll see what I mean.
Officials have called off the search for a woman who went overboard had left her cabin at about 1 a.m. to get some fresh air but never returned. Passengers say hundreds of people on board launched a search party where the woman was last seen wearing pink pajamas in vain. After several hours of search efforts, which included a helicopter search of the waters, the cruise line abandoned the search.
Was on an all-girls cruise vacation when disaster struck. It was 2 a.m. The ship was the Carnival Liberty, sailing in the Gulf of Mexico. Climbed this rail on the 10th floor deck. Suddenly, she fell backwards and plunged into the water. It was captured on the ship's thermal imaging camera. Her body was never found. But it wasn't until they looked at surveillance footage that they realized she went overboard. By the time Carnival contacted the Coast Guard, 15 hours had passed.
So obviously this video has been doctored. There were some cuts in there where they actually took out the name of the person who had fallen overboard, and for good reason, because obviously it's not Jess Greenberg. This is fake news, and kind of a lot of times this is how this sort of thing gets started. Rumors of people dying and doctored videos like this are generally used by people in order to get past their channel threshold so they can get to monetization. I suspect it has something to do with that, or they're just trying to see how much money they can make on a video about Jess Greenberg dying. But I wanted to bring this up because it's, you know, this is something that is kind of pervasive and you kind of have to watch out for. The other big story this week is Eddie Van Halen. As you guys probably know by now, he had a cancer scare in the early 2000s. He had about a third, I think, of his tongue removed because he had mouth cancer. The cancer apparently has returned and he is going to have to undergo treatment once again. But what's interesting is that he has attributed the development of his mouth cancer in the first place not to his smoking habits, which are well documented, but to the fact that he used a metal guitar pick for so long, and when he was doing his tapping, that he would stick his guitar pick in his mouth while tapping. So he thinks, for whatever reason, psychosomatic or whatever it is, he thinks that the metal guitar pick and sticking that in his mouth all of those years, you know, while he played, had something to do with it. Now this story is rebutting that, and the doctor says it probably isn't true, but what the hell does he know? Honestly, I would take his opinion on it over anyone else's, because he's the one that did it. He would know if it's related. He would be the one to say, hey, you know, it's no coincidence that every time I stuck that pick in my mouth, it was on this side of my mouth, and that's the side that got the cancer, or the, you know, that he would know, I think, quicker than anyone else. But it's interesting to me that, you know, not only do we have a metal pick involved, because as you guys probably know, I'm a proponent of metal picks. I like using metal picks on electric guitars, and we talked about picks a lot on this channel and the benefits of using different materials in your picks and not just plastics. But it's really interesting to me that, I mean, if Eddie Van Halen does end up passing away from this cancer, or if it does end up taking his life, it would be directly as a result of his tapping.
You know, I mean, it's like, am I being stupid?
No, that's great.
No, you know, there you go. No, you know, there you go. No, you know, there you go. I'm doing this new thing now. Check this out. Here. Zoom in. You know, playing a guitar like a piano.
Eddie, thanks for sitting here with us. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
If you do read this article, it does, you know, bring up the tobacco use, and the doctor is saying, you know, oh, the known tobacco effects probably are the cause, because, you know, we've known about those for a long time, and those proven effects, you know, far outweigh any effects from cobalt or nickel or lead or whatever might have been in the coin that he was using. But, you know, again, I don't necessarily buy that. I think he probably knows better than anyone. And he even says right here, he says, I used metal picks, they're brass and copper, which I always held in my mouth, in the exact place where I got tongue cancer. So I would say there's got to be something to this. You know, he would be he would be the one to know. And here's what I also think, that when you're using a pick on your guitar as well, you know, anything that's on your hands, you know, you might have touched other things on the guitar on the stage, you know, in the the bathroom, whatever. You've touched the pick, you put it in your mouth. So anything that's also on your hands is going to be in your mouth on that spot. Anytime you use the pick on your strings, you're going to have nickel, depending on what the core of the string is made of. Some strings are made of different materials. They, said cobalt could be one of them. You could pick up traces of cobalt and nickel also from the pickups. So there's all kinds of things that could have gotten on the pick, and you put it right there on your tongue in that same spot, and I think he may be onto something with that. So if nothing else, if you're a person who taps a lot and you do this, you find yourself putting your pick in your mouth, just beware that, Eddie Van Halen at least thinks that he got mouth cancer from doing that repeatedly for years and years. So that might be something just to consider. If you use metal picks, don't put them in your mouth. Speaking of musicians and unforeseen side effects, I thought this was an interesting story someone sent me. This San Francisco sound engineer accidentally dosed himself with LSD while cleaning a 1960s synthesizer.
Tonight, a mystery involving a groundbreaking musical instrument from decades ago.
So the rumor is part of it was dipped in LSD.
At Cal State East Bay, this electronic vintage instrument is finally working again. How it got fixed will take you on a long, strange trip.
Broadcast Ops Manager Elliot Curtis tackles all sorts of technical problems. However, recently, a strange electrical transmission threw him for a loop. It happened inside his brain.
It felt like I was tripping on LSD.
It turns out Elliot was indeed tripping on LSD. He got dosed by accident at home in his workshop. Last year, Elliot volunteered to fix a vintage analog music modular instrument. Cal State East Bay acquired the instrument in the 60s. It fell out of favor and was stored in a cool, dark place for decades.
It was in a closet in the corner of a classroom.
On the device, a red-colored module. Elliot opened it and saw something stuck under a knob.
A crust or crystalline residue on it.
He sprayed a cleaning solvent and started to push the dissolving crystal with his finger. 45 minutes later, he began to feel
a strange tingling sensation.
The trip lasted 9 hours. Chemical testing identified the substance as LSD. It turns out this machine has deep roots to the West Coast counterculture. It's called a Buchla 100. It was created by Don Buchla of Berkeley. In 1966, some Buchla modules ended up on an old school bus purchased by LSD advocate Ken Kesey. Sounds from them appear to interrupt a KPIX interview.
Go ahead, would you repeat that again?
Buchla used LSD. He was friends with Owsley Stanley, the genius behind the Grateful Dead's sound system. Stanley was also famous for making the purest LSD to ever hit the street. Here he is in 1967, fleeing our cameras outside a federal court after a huge LSD bust in Orinda.
Okay.
The vintage Buchla is now back at Cal State and ready for music students to explore. As to how the LSD ended up on the red module,
isn't there a lot of legends?
but few facts. Buchla and Stanley are both dead. No public records exist to shed any light. Even so, Chani says what happened to Elliot is astonishing.
It's a little bit like time travel. If you could go back, that would be the way to get there.
One final note, no more trips with this Buchla. It's been cleaned of all LSD.
An LSD expert told us that if it's kept in a cool, dry place like this was, LSD could last for decades.
So that's definitely something to consider next time you're working on something that was known to belong to someone who, just be careful out there, techs. Really, but it's really interesting to me that this guy, that even it would last that long, you know what I mean? That the compounds would even still be present on any surfaces for that length of time or even be effective. Also in the news, you guys who are on Facebook or on any forums here lately, you probably already know about this, but I'll put it up anyway. The Guitarist Junior Brown's custom double neck guitar was stolen recently. If you guys have seen this thing, or if you know anybody that has said, hey, check out my new guitar, You know who this belongs to. I mean, it doesn't get much more custom than this. This thing, I mean, I just thought I would show it just because of how funky it is. I mean, check this out. It's basically like it's almost like, it's like part Tele, part Stratocaster, part, I don't know, part 8-string pedal steel or lap steel guitar. So basically it's a double neck. It's got a lap steel neck. It's also got a traditional Spanish neck, and it's just a weirdo instrument. I have to admit, I've never seen Junior Brown perform live, so I don't know what it looks like when he's switching back and forth on necks, but I suspect it's got to be fairly entertaining. But, you know, if you guys have seen this guitar, if you know where it is, you can contact Tanya Brown on Facebook and reach out and let them know how to retrieve it. This also kicked up in my news feed, and I thought it was kind of interesting. The band Toto is finally calling it quits after finishing their 40th anniversary tour in Philadelphia. So that's a pretty long run for a band. You've got to give them props. You know, of course, Toto had some really big hits in the 80s with songs like Africa and Rosanna. Those were my favorite too. Hold the Line was also a big hit. Steve Lukather, of course, a wonderful guitar player who had some Hot Licks videos back in the 80s, and he was basically on a lot of other recordings, such as Michael Jackson's Thriller album. They were kind of a super group in their own right. So, but yeah, I think they've earned their retirement, and it's real sad to see a band like Toto kind of stop. But you know, when your time is up, your time is up. So, and speaking of musicians kind of calling it quits, the YouTuber Stevie T, you guys might know of him. He does a lot of funny kind of guitar videos, usually taking the piss out of other guitar players who fail on stage a lot of times, which is kind of interesting, especially considering you know, he had a chance here to join Dragonforce on their latest tour playing bass, but he kind of I'm not gonna say choked, but he kind of at the last minute choked. He kind of told him, you know, I can't do it because choke. I have anxiety issues. And he made a whole video about it, and you know, revealed that yes, you know, I was asked to perform with Dragonforce on bass because their bass player had quit, and you know, he was going to fill in on a tour or maybe even become a permanent member, or who knows. And he had even started learning some of the bass songs and, you know, and stuff, and he got so far along and he was like, you know, I just can't do it because I have anxiety. So, you know, I understand that. I get it. You know, the stage is not for everybody. Some people are just destined to play in their bedrooms. You know, I can't really say too much either. I mean, as much as I've played guitar over the years, you know, I haven't played all that much out. I've always had fun every time I've gone on stage and played with somebody. It's always been a great time, but it's not something I really strive for. I don't feel a calling to do it. I'm kind of more like the Beatles after like 1967. I would just rather go in a studio and put a bunch of, you know, ideas on tape before I would want to, you know, try to seek validation by going on a tour. I don't know. That's just me. And maybe he's the same way, but you know, to hear him say it, it's more along the lines of him kind of having almost an agoraphobic sort of thing, or he says crippling anxiety. So I'm just curious, you know, how many of you guys, first of all, how many of you guys tour regularly? How many of you actually play locally on a regular basis, are in bands? How many of you guys are just kind of like me? You're just more or less basement or couch guitarists, you know, or like Stevie T, and you can't even fathom going on stage and performing in front of people. You know, it's something that you actually dread. I would be interested to hear everyone's thoughts on this. You know, I know a lot of people who just get violently sick before a gig, and they have to actually go throw up somewhere, or they're going to be ill on stage. But after they throw up, you know, they go up on stage and kick ass, you know. So it's like a lot of people have different ways of dealing with this sort of anxiety. So I get it, but at the same time, isn't it kind of ironic that somebody who has kind of made his living bashing people who do fails on stage can't even get on a stage himself for real and do it himself? So we won't laugh at you, Stevie, like you laugh at everyone else. Anyway, so that'll do it for the news. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this Shitpost Friday. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, click subscribe down below. Also go over to channel 2. I will have more material over there for the weekend. And for now, y'all take care.
But then as we got closer and closer to the actual tour date, all I can say is I started having what I can only describe as it would get to the point where all I could think about was